David Andrews, and I hail from the Ecclesia in Georgetown, Guyana. Now, Guyana presently has 6 ecclesias situated in 2 of its 3 counties, Georgetown, Eccles and Mocha and Demerara County, and New Amsterdam, Kilcoy, and Platanka in Berbice. Since the days when Brother John Blenman landed in Georgetown and began a preaching campaign at the Stabroek Market Square, the truth in Guyana, and particularly in Georgetown, have risen and fallen from many ecclesias since 1895, comprising several hundred brethren, to just a struggling few nearing the point of extinction. They were nevertheless kept alive primarily through the tenacious efforts of the local brethren. Thanks be to God, through the efforts of Sister Lorraine Mitchell and others, there came a turning point in 1955 when Brother Harry, along with Brother Alan Hayward, arrived in Georgetown and conducted a radical Bible campaign at the town hall, involving several days and nights of leafleting, preaching, and follow-up work. The interests of hundreds of persons were ignited, leading to packed audiences and unending questions about the Bible. And this newly heard gospel of the kingdom, eventually leading to dozens of baptisms. This resulted in the formation of the Christadelphian Bible Mission, which organizes and funds such efforts, and this has continued up to this time. The Georgetown Ecclesia was by this time settled in a tiny building contributed by Brother Clifford Howard Sr. at Brickdam and Winter Place, where it was located for several decades, before the property was given up in 1975. From there, the brethren moved to where they are now located, at Brickdam and Brummel Place. Back in the 1960s, it had over 40 members, but over the years, this has been reduced to 21, 7 brothers and 14 sisters. It still has a function in Sunday school and youth circle.
Okay, the history of the Guyana Christadelphians as I learned about it. I'm thankful to Sister Maud for asking me to record the history of the Christadelphians in Guyana, which is so tied up with my Howard family in the first half of the 1900s. So these recollections are personal and do not record the many brothers and sisters whose names I may not call, but who are known to our Heavenly Father. As a child, I remember my grandmother, Sister Kathleen Howard, telling me that she understood the truth was brought to British Guyana by a brother from Barbados by the name of John Blenman. I have found some information in Brother Stanley Owen's book, Into All the World, that Mr. Blenman traveled from Barbados to England with his mother, and there came in contact with the meetings being held around Britain at the time by Brother Roberts and Brother Thomas. I've always thought how unusual it would be for people to go from Barbados to England. We're talking about the middle of the 1800s. Anyway, John Blenman was baptized in England in 1884 and then returned to Barbados, then traveled sometime after to British Guyana. And my grandmother believed this is how the Christadelphian faith found its way to Guyana.
How Christadelphians came to Guyana and set up Ecclesias. What is most interesting is that we have an account from way back when there was no Christadelphian. And then we started with one person who came, and through that one person, right now we have all of these ecclesias. This is Brother Alan Barrow's story. Brother Alan Barrow was a child when many things recorded here were done. He has left this record for his children and any other interested ones. At 16, His mother, Esme Ayanti Barrow, was baptized. His grandparents, Joseph and Ophelia Whence, was baptized too. Converts of Brother Bledmon, who taught things that were quite new. This Brother Bledmon in those days preached at the market square. He captivated his audience, who came from far and near. This resulted in a building being procured as a meeting place for all. The crowd grew to 150, and the building became too small. They split up into 4 meetings, the Reed brothers and Brother Yard. There was also Brother Wharton, who became the one in charge. After a while, they joined again and became one. Under the leadership of Senior Pastor Wharton, he was the great-grandfather of Stella, Allen's future wife, making the Barrows clan for generation Christadelphians all their lives. He narrated facts about the Chase family, including Brother Howard, but Sister Penny Cates, to whom they are related, gave some story in her words. He switched to his own account of things that he remembered and named many persons in those days who impressed him in so many ways. Sister Chase, Thompson, Lovell Went, Newsom, Lois, Agard, and more Went, Hodge, Licorice, and Charles too, some single and some married, 1 or 2. He spoke of the days of him attending Sunday school, and upon one day all meetings were held. But God in his mercy caused some young people to be baptized as well. The truth caught fire, smoldered, and then died down, but it never went out because other preachers were found. One such person was Brother Roland Smith, who with his convert Lorraine Mitchell brought others to do their bit. The first part of Brother Allen's narrative has come to an end, and he to another area did descend. Agricola turned Eccles and Mokatu, where Ecclesias were established, serving many, or sometimes a few. He died at the age of 75, having worked in the Lord's vineyard all his life. His last exhortation was at Winter Place, and where his 4 daughters were also baptized.
The missionary work before I was born, well, I understood that is written in a book called Into All the World, Go into all the world and preach the gospel, and by Stan Owen. And in that book you will find how this brother John Bledman came to Guyana, and he went to the market at, not the border market, the other market, the Stabrook market. He preached there, and the people were very interested in what he said, and so they flocked to listen to him, and quite a number of people got baptized then. After that, I understood that the Georgetown Ecclesia was formed by him, and then it went up and down. One minute they had a lot of members, and then as time went on, they lost their members for various reasons, and then the membership came back again. In my time, I was in 1922, I was born, but I became a Christadelphian on the 1st of May, 1951. No, I was not born into the truth. I think my mother was a Moravian, and we hailed from Suriname, came over to British Guyana, and never went to church. But we had a Sunday school in our home. So when I was 8 years old, I used to go to Sunday school and learn all about most of the Anglican religion in those days. And that was, in the 1930s, as you can imagine, right? Well, how I came to a knowledge of the truth was that after the war, 1950, 1945 war, I went to work at Atkinson Field. It had just become a civil aviation place instead of a military. The Americans had it as a military place. Anyway, as it became a civil aviation, I got a job as the secretary for the what's his name now? I've forgotten his name at the moment. Anyway, I worked as his secretary up at the airport. And while I was there, within the first year of living at the airport, Brother Roland Smith came from Britain to also work at the airport. He was going to map Guyana. That is what their aviation was all about. So he was going to map Guyana. As he was the photographer, he had a lot of time in between his work. So we got to talking, and he used to ask me if I know anything about the Christadelphians. So I said, no, I've never heard about the Christadelphians. I've heard about the Quakers, I've heard about the Shakers, I've heard about the Jordanites, and I've heard about all the different people in Guyana, but never heard of the Christadelphians. And then it so happened the same time he was asking me that question, there was a lady sitting beside us not so far away. And she says, oh, I can tell you about the Christadelphians because I have a very dear friend and she lives next door to Christadelphians. And as a matter of fact, the church is in their garden. So that was when Brother Roland Smith met Brother Clifford Howard. He had the little church, they called it Winter Place Ecclesia, and it was in their garden. When I had leave to go to Britain, and I had met the little meeting room, and I had known about the members there. And then this Brother Wharton, who was the elder, asked me if I went to Britain, would I please tell them that the little lampstand is going out, and would they please come and help British Guyana? Because if the lampstand went out, that means in Guyana there would be no Christadelphians at all. In 1953, I got baptized in 51. In 1953, I went over to Britain, and almost immediately I met Brother Alan Haywood and Harry Whittaker. I met Harry first of all, and I told them about what Brother Wharton had asked me to give them the message. So I gave them the message that they needed to come down to British Guyana. So he said, where is British Guyana? I said, in South America. So I had to show them an air letter form with the map because they didn't know where it was. Anyway, the two of them got together and said they will try to see that they could come. Now, to get to British Guyana from England was a very difficult task. They had to beg people for money because there was no funds to bring them here. So when they finally came to British Guyana, it was money donated by relatives and friends. And so they arrived in British Guyana 2 years after I was in Britain, and that would have been 1955. And then we had a big campaign. And that big campaign was when the people flocked to the town hall or the city hall to hear what the two brethren had to say. And we had a resounding success. So much so that when Brother Alan wrote his diary, he wrote the diary and sent it to Britain. And the people in Britain were waiting to see what success we would have. And when they understood it was successful, the Auxiliary Lecturing Society in Britain, who used to do all the preaching, they say, well, it is necessary to have a Bible mission to go out now into the outer world and to see what success they would have. Because British Guyana seemed to be very successful. And Harry Whittaker told them he had gone briefly to Barbados and found that the people there were equally welcoming to them to preach. And that is how I would say that the Bible mission was started in 1955-56. I would say that when I went over to Britain in 1953, the meeting was a very tiny little meeting. And I don't know, but when I came back from Britain, I spent a year in Britain. When I came back from Britain, to my great astonishment, I found a lot of young people had been baptized while I was away. And I couldn't understand where they came from. And I was told they had the Sunday school going. And remember that I was in isolation, so I never used to attend the meeting much. But I came back to find that a lot of Sunday school members were now being baptized. And some of those people were Esther Worrell, her brother David, Arthur Green, and his wife Doreen Green. All of them came into a knowledge of the truth before the 1955 campaign. So when the brethren in Britain came over to British Guyana to preach, they had already had a little group of young Christadelphians who had just been baptized, and they asked me if I would take their literature and have it, multiplied. They would send some literature in British Guyana, and we would go and get it photocopied and so on. And then we would go and preach it to people. So we took all the young people that were there, and they went out on the road. What were they doing on the road? They went from street to street, distributing the literature that we had and telling people to come to the town hall. And that is why when we had the town hall meetings, we had about 300 members, 250 to 300 strangers came to do that Bible campaign. I didn't particularly help it along. I think it was those young brethren, like Arthur Green and Doreen Green and Esther Worrell. Those were the ones that helped it along.
Brother Alan Barrow, who has since fallen asleep, gave testimony that preaching campaigns were carried out on the East Bank, at Prospect, Herstelling, Covent Garden, and Farm by way of cottage meetings, open air, and Bible classes. But no ecclesias were formed until they reached Agricola around 1963. Lacking a meeting place of their own, they met in individual homes around 1967 when they acquired a plot of land at Eccles from the Sugar Estate Company, thus enabling themselves as the Eccles Ecclesia. Their membership currently stands at around 33, 13 brothers and 20 sisters.
Well, Elaine Williams from the Eccles. I was in so many ecclesias, over the years in the truth. Was in Eccles, Agricola Eccles, Georgetown. I spent 10 years in Georgetown, and I spent 4 years in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, when I got to know about Christadelphians, was in 59, 60. I can't remember the days, but it's either the Christmas Sunday in December or the New Year's Sunday in January. My uncle, you might have heard of Bert Donovan. His name really is Orlin Adalbert Donovan. He was in the meeting, and he invited me out. He came by us. I was living in Agricola, and that time it was a fairly good meeting, but it was a young meeting. So the brethren used to come up every week from Georgetown to assist with presiding and exhortations and lectures, right? Well, he invited me out. And the first talk I heard was Brother Alan Barrow. And he spoke on Armageddon. And it's something that since I was a teenager, I used to hear the J that was coming around and talk. And I always was interested, in knowing and wanting to admire about them. I always wanted within myself, I would like to be like them, to talk about the truth. But when Brother Barry talked about the same blood and all the terrible war, but he ended up by now talking about the glories of the kingdom if you're baptized. And is that what caught me? I went home back and I told my mother, because she lived with me. And I said, Mommy, I'm going to join this church. She said, Elaine, just like that? I said, yes, because I hear something good. So she said, well, you must go Sunday morning. Because she used to go and spend weekends with him and go to Georgetown Church. She said, well, you must go Sunday morning. So the next Sunday morning, I went into the meeting and Brother Hugo Mitchell spoke. And of course, Sister Lorraine always interested when she see people. So she came and she talked with me and she started saying, like letters, you know, write letters accorded to me, right? And then that was in 60. And then in May 60, the 22nd of May, 1960, I got baptized. Me and my mother, because when Brother Barrow came to give us instruction, she didn't say she want baptized, but I know I want. But he tell us sit down on this one. By the time you finished here, both of us got baptized. It was a big, we had Brother Vernon Barrow. He was baptized with us too, and Brother Dundas, Leon Dundas. The four of us got baptized.
This is at the Agricultural Ecclesia?
No, it was not an ecclesia as such. Well, I mean, with a pool to baptize. We had to go down to Georgetown. All our baptisms were done in Georgetown. We used to go on Friday nights at the Bible class. They'll baptize us, you know, and then we come into fellowship Sunday morning. But we were baptized on Sunday morning because it was the same year they had the Paterno at the Y. So we already got baptized and went across there. And the meeting, we just was on the bottom house at 4th Street, Agricola. But so we were there for some time, and then we had to remove from there, and we had to we got a place to rent on the school, but the people were living upstairs, and it wasn't very nice because when we church, one of they ponging there, and then there's a brother that came to work with the then Barclays Bank, Brother Christadelphians, and he wasn't a missionary. But then when he came, he said he wanted to go to an ecclesia that he can work and not, you know, that need him. And we needed him because, as I told you, it was a young ecclesia. The brethren were not, well, what do I say? They only had like Brother Barrow and John Small that were really senior brethren, but you know, we had young ones. And so, and then he told us that he would like to live on the bank because it would be better for him. And we got a place there, a very nice house. It was very big, but the people had these steps come in, and on the roadside they had this in those days, you know, called gallery, right? And it was big enough, and so we went across there. We moved into that place, and you might have heard people say Lot 6. So it was known as Lot. We used to say Lot 6. And whilst we were on the thing, there's a brother came, Alan Haywood, and he saw the numbers, because it was about 20 or so at that bottom house, and he offered us a building. He'll send them a frame.
This is where?
The frame for to build a meeting at Eccles.
At Eccles. So this
Yeah.
is where Eccles is now?
Not at Eccles, at Agricola. Because we were all, and the majority of brethren were Agricola people, lived in Agricola. I lived in Agricola. Only Brother and Sister Barrow lived, and they lived at Moko. That had to come out. And there was a brother named George Singh from Friendship, but all the others lived in Agricola. Right? So he offered this thing, and then while Chris was there, we formed a committee like a building committee. And I was on 5th Street, then I was there. And they used to come, Georgetown Bread used to come up every Monday night and help us, and we built the block. That meeting room was built with blocks that brethren and sisters made.
So this is 4th Street?
No, we were at Lot 6 at that time.
6,
But I lived in 5th Street,
Uh-huh.
and the house was on stilts as it was, so we had the bottom house. So they came, and we built all the blocks to that hall now at Eccles. Because we couldn't get a proper place in Agricola to make.
Oh, so you had to move to Eccles?
Yes, so we got a land there at Eccles, and so we built it. And then when the frame came down, there was a brother Gibson from East Coast. He and about 2 others he hired because he was a contractor. And his brother and sister built that meeting room. help lay blocks, do the flooring. They worked hard, fill up sand to build up the land and everything. See, and we moved there around because I think Clement got baptized in '69. And I think that was the first baptism in Eccles Hall. So Eccles Hall was not, Eccles wasn't a meeting formed, if you're getting what I mean. It was just the agricultural members, which is the meeting, that moved to Eccles. Well, from then on, we started preaching, and we got, well, Brother Harry, Harry Lal, he was a Georgia member, he moved in a scheme too. So he's a couple of years, so he came over, right? And Jenny was living on the public road at Rumfell, and so we all in Eccles, right? And we did a lot of preaching work in Eccles. And at that time too, well, then after Chris Starry left, he wasn't here when the building started. Joe Badlow came and took over to help with. As I tell you, it was a young Ecclesian.
Yeah.
Right. So Brother Joe Badlow and his family came and lived at Lot 6 with a brother named Alan Dan and Charlie Bunyan. Charlie is deceased now, he was from Georgetown. And they came and they lived in there and they worked, and then we got baptisms from in Eccles because this brother Karen said he lived over the other part of Eccles. And he was one of Brother Joe's workmates, and he was one that got baptized. But then we had a mucker. Brother Allen was preaching because at Lot 6, the Josephs came in at Lot 6. So they were from Moko, Alan Barrow from Moko.
And he came over to join Eccles?
No, they were agricultural.
Oh, but
Remember,
they just living
right? So they had to come out, and then they preached in Moko, and they had a couple baptisms very well in Moko, Moko people as it were, and because of that, they decided, well, we should. It was expensive transportation coming out to Eccles, and that is why they break away from us. I don't ever use the word right, but but because the Josephs had transportation, they remained in Eccles, and Alan Barrow, and the others that hadn't transportation, they stayed in Moka, and so Moka was. That's how now Moka Ecclesia was started at a building to a rented building. Well then, as I said, we come into here Eccles, and we preached and preached and.
Many of the Eccles Ecclesia lived and still do about 4 miles further up the east bank of Demerara in the village of Mucka, among whom were Brother Alan Barrow and his sister wife Stella. This loyal and hard-working couple saw it fit to start a separate ecclesia within Mucka in 1980. Today, it has a small membership of over 12, 4 brothers and 8 sisters. It also has a functioning Sunday school and youth circle.
My name is Isme Morine Barrow. I was baptized on the 28th of January 1995. I was baptized in the Georgetown Ecclesia by Brother Todd Green. And then I transferred to the Moka Ecclesia in 2005 when I moved into Moka on retirement. Mr. Alan Barrow was my father, Brother Alan Barrow. He was friendly with one Mr. Eric Joseph. They used to live in adjoining streets. My father lived in Duncan Street, Camberville, and Mr. Eric Joseph lived in William Street. So they would ride to work every day. And after a while, Mr. Eric Joseph moved into Moka, and he informed my father that there's a lot of land selling cheap in Moka, and it's good land and so on, and you should consider moving up to Moka. This was in 1953. My father took the advice of Mr. Eric Joseph, and they moved up to Moka. He moved with his family while Mr. Joseph was already moved with his family. My father wanted a more peaceful life because he found on Sundays he always had visitors and he couldn't really spend his Sundays as he used to in Georgetown. So he thought Mocha would have been quite a nice place. So he moved into Mocha and with the advice of Mr. Joseph. My earliest recollection of the Christadelphian Church was when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and we lived in 4th Street, Agricola. We had moved to Agricola because of schooling. It was more convenient. We were going to a private school in Macdoom, and it was more convenient. So we moved from Mocha temporarily, and we lived in Mocha. And I remember the church being kept under the residence of Brother John Small. After that, and I remember visiting missionaries coming to Mocha and to Georgetown and to Agricola and Eccles. However, the Mocha Ecclesia started around 1980. What happened was that a campaign was started, a preaching effort was started in Mocha, the Mocha Arcadia community. And it was a very fruitful campaign. There were lots of matured people in Mocha who were interested, and a series of cottage meetings were started then because of the interest that was shown from the campaigns. Cottage meetings were started at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Mr. and Mrs. Hopkinson, sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Hopkinson Arcadia. And in Mocha, cottage meetings were also held at the Barrows residence and the Joseph's residence. This went on for a while, and we had baptisms. There were lots of baptisms. We had baptized. We had Mr. and Mrs. Warner, who were our opposite neighbors. We had Mrs. Stella Craig. Most of the people lived in this street. We had some from Arcadia. We had Sister Peters. We had Brother Daphnis. We have Sister Craig's daughter, Pamela. We had Sister Inverness and Pammy, Inverness Green and Pammy. We had Sister Reese. We had Sister Valda Delph. Brother John Small moved from Agricola and he came into Mocha with his wife Pearlie Small. And we had quite a few others, Sister Walterine Innes. We had Brother Richards, who also served on the Calgi at one point. And membership kept increasing. It was found that the number of people that had to be shuttled to the church in Eccles at that time with private transportation, they had to pay transportation to go to Eccles. It was more economical to rent a building in Mocha with all these members rather than pay transportation for them to go to church at Eccles. So the church first started at the Arcadia Community Center, which was like obliquely opposite to Mrs. Hopkinson at the time. And from that, and Brother Richards also lived obliquely opposite. So church started at Mocha Community Center, and then it was found that Mr. and Mrs. Primo that lived in Nelson Street had a small building, a small house, which they wanted to rent. They had a big 10-bedroom house on the premises, but they had a small house that probably was suitable for the caretaker, but they decided, or my father persuaded him, to convert it to a building that was suitable for church. So that was rented and we had our own church. It was agreed that as long as we wanted to stay there, they would pay the rent and that was our premises. Just, renting, but it was agreed that it would have been the church's premises. That went on for a while, and then in 1994, Mr. and Mrs. Primo decided that they didn't want to live anymore in Mocha or anywhere, and they were going to sell the property. But they were not selling the small building alone or the big building alone. They were selling it as a complex. So the church had no need for a 10-bedroom house, nor could they purchase that. And it wasn't like applicable for, it wasn't suitable for a church. So I think the CBM was approached and it was agreed that they would assist Mocha in purchasing some land and building a church. That came to fruition eventually in 2009. Mocha had their own church. At the time when the church was started, there were approximately 12 members. The Mocha had some funds at the time, and they contributed in a small amount to the building of the church, as well as what the CBM had given. Prior to our church, when the church started, they also started in 1978, 1980. They started, Sunday school was started, which was, the teachers there were Sister Anna Lou Joseph, Sister Lois Joseph, and Brother Patrick Joseph. This was around 1980. A youth circle was started, which was headed by my mother, Sister Stella Barrow. The church grew and grew, as I said, until 2009 when we had our own building. At one point, there were 7 baptisms at one time in Mocha from the youth circle. And that was in 1998, October 1998. And the 7 youths that were baptized then, some of them are still in our church. We have Sister Elizabeth Europe, who everybody knows, Sister Elizabeth Europe Clements now. Sister Yonex Caesar, who's now Sister Yonet Craig. Sister Janet April. Brother Derek Cyrus, who went to New York. Sister Christine Johns, who is the sister of Sister Elizabeth Europe. And Sister Seymour Branford, who's a member of the church in Canada now. She's now in Canada.
The New Amsterdam Ecclesia took hold around 1960, occupying their own premises at the Strand and St. Magdalene Streets, where they are still located today. Presently, it has enrolled about 23 members, 8 brothers and 15 sisters.
Okay, this is Sister Leela Paltu from the Washington Ecclesia, and I was baptized in New Amsterdam on the 9th of May, 1965. Now, whatever I'm going to say is subject to corrections and additions by brethren and sisters whose knowledge and experience could be better than mine, because I may have forgotten lots of things. So I will just tell you what I remember as it affected me. There are no coincidences when it comes to God's purpose in our lives and the working out of that purpose in seemingly natural ways and events. What I say is limited to members of my family and how they were involved or affected by the preaching of the truth. Now, the Christadelphians were already established in Georgetown, and they decided, well, to spread the gospel further afield in obeying the Lord's commands, as we read and know in Matthew 28, verses 19 and 20. Go and spread the gospel. And we are so happy. I'm so happy that they did, because me and my family, we came to a knowledge of the truth, the saving truth, through their efforts. Thank God. So as I said, they were established already in Georgetown, and it was with the help of the Georgetown brethren that CBM missionary Will Watkin came to have a series of lectures at New Amsterdam Town Hall. It was there that my aunt, Nazni Mohammed, heard the preaching of the truth. And she showed interest in it. And Brother Will decided to come and visit her at her home in Vryhead. And it was there that my mother and her brother, they heard the truth from Brother Will Watkin. But sad to say, my aunt, Naz, she didn't decide to become a Christadelphian then. She continued being a Lutheran. And Brother Will Watkin, who used to visit from his place of boarding and lodging at Sister Ceres in Commingsville, New Amsterdam. He used to come with his Bible under his arm, walking to Vryhead and preaching to whoever would hear at the shop that my mother had. And she later accepted the truth. Now, at that time, there were brethren already in New Amsterdam, Christadelphian brethren already in New Amsterdam, because when my mother was baptized, she had to go to Georgetown to be baptized at the Georgetown Hall, but there were brethren already at a meeting place in New Amsterdam. There were, I remember Brother Howard, Brother Albert, Brother Johnson, Brother Wilson, Daniels, Josiah Yearwood, Sister Ceres, Burkett, Johnson, Caldera, and Sister Wilson. They were all members already. And they were having meetings at Charles Place in New Amsterdam. That was around 1954 when my mother became interested in the truth. And when she was baptized, she went to that meeting at Charles Place. It was really not a big building or anything. It was a bottom house with lattice work, and it was almost a public place because it was just lattice work, and you could see from the street, you could see what's going on in the meeting. There was no like privacy, and there was no baptismal pool or anything like that, just a little enclosure. Now, after Brother Will Watkins left, Brother Harry Whitaker and Sister Phyllis, his wife, they came to Georgetown. Brother Harry was a teacher at Queen's College, and he used to come on weekends with the Georgetown brethren to preach in New Amsterdam and the surrounding villages. Now, at Queen's College, it was there that my cousin Wilfred Ali and his good friend Clive Tripal were students, and Brother Harry Whitaker used to have Bible discussions with them there, and then they became interested, and Wilfred would come home back. He and his friend Clive, they would come home to Vryhead, and my mother, already being a Christadelphian, and her brother Richard, Wilfred's father, he became interested too, and so there was a little group there in Vryhead, and it wasn't far to the New Amsterdam Ecclesia, and so they all went there to the New Amsterdam group. Now, on weekends when Brother Harry would come, they would have meetings during this time. and that is at Firish, Kanji Sisters Village. And gradually the numbers grew. There was one another QC student, Brother Compton in Stanley, who would come with Harry and others, and he would be the preacher to do the meetings on the road, and lots of people would come and listen. And so they had a group, they had people at Firish and people at Sisters who were interested at that time, and so the numbers grew. And after Brother Harry and Sister Phyllis left, the New Amsterdam had a bigger number of members, and they needed somebody to be stationed there to carry on the work. Now, after Brother Harry, then I think we had Brother Percy Lander. No, sorry, we had some American brethren, American and a Canadian. That was, we had Brother Don Stiles from America and Brother Ron Abel from Canada. The two of them were just in their early 20s, and they came preaching at open air meetings and carry on the meeting in New Amsterdam, Firish, Canefield, Sisters, and so on. But Brother Don Stiles stayed for a short time because he found that he missed his home and his fiancée a lot, so he returned to America and left Ron alone. Ron stayed for a while and built up the youth circle and the Ecclesia for a while, and then he left. After that, Brother Percy Lander came. He was a retired school teacher like Brother Will Watkin, and he came there and preached for a while. And then Brother Barry Parks, a young man from UK, came. He used to be a AT&T worker in New Amsterdam and carried on the gospel proclamation in Firish as well as New Amsterdam and Sisters. Now, after Brother Barry left, Brother Barry Parks, we had the Greens. That was Brother Edmund and Sister Hope Green. They were an older couple, and they were responsible for getting us the hall, the New Amsterdam Hall. But before that, I'm going ahead of myself. After the Bread Street Charles Place meeting, which was very inconvenient, we had moved to the Eton, a place called Eton College, a building that housed a high school. It was during the week, and on Sundays, it was the meeting place for the Christadelphians. We stayed there for a while, and then we had moved to the Dave's Photo Studio at St. Anne and Main Street. And that was a small room, very choked up and dark. And it was very inconvenient. And so Brother and Sister Green, they were responsible for getting us the present hall at Strand and St. Magdalene Street. Yes, that building was once a shoe repair shop, and then they converted it and they made it like how it looks now. When the Greens left, the Clinkards came. His brother Clinkard worked at Reeford's, and his sister wife, she didn't work anywhere, but um, Elizabeth, one of the daughters, they had two daughters, Elizabeth and Jennifer. Jennifer used to be she was a nurse at the New Amsterdam Psychiatric Hospital. And Elizabeth's husband, Paul, he was a teacher at BEI. Now, after the Richardsons left, we had the Simpsons, David and Carol Simpson, who both worked at BEI. David was an English teacher and Carol was the school secretary. They worked with the young people in New Amsterdam. There was a good group of us, and in Firish too, Sunday school. And by then in Firish, there was an Ecclesia, and there were lots of baptisms, but they didn't have a hall yet. We used to meet in Sister Lord's house. There were Sunday schools in New Amsterdam, Vryhead, Number 2, Canefield, Kilcoy, and I think, I don't know if Brother Clive had started Sunday school in Rose Hall, but they had all those different Sunday schools and CYC. Also, David and Carol started a young group of Christadelphians because there were quite a few of us, at least about 8 of us, and young married couple, about 8 of us. And we used to have special meetings on Monday nights. I remember that very well. And it was a very, he was very active, and we really enjoyed their time together with the New Amsterdam Ecclesia. We used to have cottage meetings too at the time on a rotation basis, you know, like sometimes we had meetings at the hall, sometimes we had meetings every week at different people's homes. And so the fellowship grew. And after the Simpsons left, the Sleepers came, Ted and Dolores Sleeper. I think they were the last couple that was stationed there in New Amsterdam. They were teachers too, and they continued the missionary work in and around New Amsterdam. And after they left, we didn't have anybody stationed from CBM. And Brother Clive and Brother Stan Howard continued as recording brethren. And when Brother Clive left and Brother Stan left, then Brother Stafford, Paltu, my husband, he was the recording brother. Then when we left in 1999, Brother Ashraf was left as, I think, the recording brother. And to date, well, they're going along by themselves now. And I think since COVID came, they're all together, like having meeting only sometimes, and with Georgetown brethren helping. So it's like we've come full circle with Georgetown helping again. So that's as far as I remember about the preaching of the truth, where like my family really was concerned. Maybe others can put in their lot. Thank you very much. That's all I remember.
Farther up the Quarantine coast, about 12 miles from New Amsterdam, we come to the Kilcoy Ecclesia, which was opened in December 1980 and now holds membership of about 11, 4 brothers and 7 sisters. Both of these Berbice ecclesias suffered heavily from migration in the 1980s and 1990s. As I can recall, Kilcoy once being the largest ecclesia, crammed with zealous young brethren.
From whence we came. All praise, thanks, and honor be to our Heavenly Father. I feel humbled and honored to be able to share with you memories from my childhood, also stories told to me by my late mother, Sister Gladys Lord, and information gathered from older brethren about the birth of the Christadelphian Ecclesia of Kilcoy, a small village in Curtin Berbice, Guyana, then known as British Guyana. My mom, Gladys, had one brother named Bill Naidu. They were very close, but Bill was an alcoholic and a wrestler. God indeed has a wonderful way of calling those who we may feel are not worthy. The story of how the truth came to Kilcoy is intriguing and started from the most unlikely individual. We will see in this story that man may sow the seed, but it is God who gives the increase. We must be thankful that God does the calling. So here we go. One evening in the year 1960, my Uncle Bill, who was a rice mill worker, was coming home from the rum shop intoxicated when he saw a white man standing and preaching by the roadside in our village, Kilcoy. Bill had a reputation in the village, a large lumbering man who never wore shoes a day in his life. And this can be evidently shown from the large callous feet that he had. Bill was so strong, he was known to lift a donkey. It was for this reason no one messed with him. So when Bill came upon this unwelcome stranger, he was so angry and upset, thinking, who gave this man the right to come to my village? I will teach him a lesson. So he got some cowitch, which is a plant that you use to make people very itchy if it touches their skin. Bill had the plant in his hands and he stumbled closer in his drunken state to this man, waiting for his chance to chase out this preacher. As Bill stumbled closer, he stopped. He started listening. And there he stood and listened to the end of the talk. His hands open, and he dropped the cowitch to the ground. He was absolutely spellbound by the talk. I wish I knew what it was about, or the words that had such a great impact. The man who was preaching that day name was Ron Abel, a Christadelphian volunteer missionary working with the already established Ecclesia in New Amsterdam. He was doing an open-air meeting at Kilcoy, located 13 miles from New Amsterdam. Bill went up to Brother Ron after, very excited, and said, "You have to come with me. I want you to meet someone." Can you imagine that in the pitch blackness in a village with no electricity, that Brother Ron agreed to go with this drunk man? Nevertheless, he did. Bill took Ron to his sister Gladys' house. It was late and dark, and he knocked on the door. She heard him call out, "Gladys!" She thought, here comes my drunk brother again. When she opened the door, she was in shock. She saw that he had a white guy with him. Oh no, she thought. Knowing the type of man Bill was, he must have kidnapped this white man. My uncle, however, was very excited and introduced Ron Abel to her as the preacher. My mom obliged and let Ron into the house. They chatted for a while, and my uncle asked Ron to come weekly to teach them more about the Bible. That week, Brother Ron came to the house again and began teaching the truth. The very next time Ron Abel came, my mom had already invited all the neighbors, and of course my uncle was there too. Just a little bit that they had begun to learn about the truth had already excited them, so much that they wanted to share it with everyone in the village. It was right here that began the igniting of a lampstand in the Kilcoy area. On August 3rd, 1961, the first baptism took place, and his name was Brother Bill Naidu, a changed man who went from a drunk to a sober man who loved the word immensely. Bill was an intelligent man. He began to devour books from the Christadelphians and began to preach. Many people learned the truth in Kilcoy from this one encounter on a dark night with a drunk man. Later, many baptisms of neighbors followed. There were names like the Papayas, Sipal, Apayas, Ramgadu, Naidu, Singh, Pasad, Doman, Amoses, Abinsets, Nikens, Tameshwar, the list goes on, and including was my parents, Brother Kenneth and Sister Gladys Lord. Sister Gladys was instrumental in getting children from the neighborhood to come to the Sunday school. My mother would feed everyone after Sunday meetings. She was indeed a mother to all, and her love, self-sacrifice, and service is what helped make her preaching effective and draw people to God and to His Word. She loved by example. The Ecclesia was held in our home for 20 years. I remember as kids, me and my brothers, we had to polish the floors, scrub the stairs, and help my mother get the house spotless for memorial meeting. My dad, Kenneth, loved to serve the emblem, and he took this job very seriously. Our home, which housed the Kilcoy Ecclesia, always had its doors open to welcome brethren at all times. The New Amsterdam Ecclesia was a sister ecclesia to Kilcoy and took them under their wings. Brother Clive Drapal, Brother Joe Badlew, the Paltus would come from New Amsterdam to help as Sunday school teachers. Many of the brethren from New Amsterdam often come to assist in Kilcoy. Missionaries came to continue the work that Brother Ron had started. These missionaries were Brother Edmund and Sister Hope Green, replaced by Brother Paul and Sister Elizabeth Richardson, the Clinkards, then David and Carol Simpson, and finally Brother Ted and Sister Dolores Sleeper. The group of newly baptized members were zealous and vibrant workers. They ran a large Sunday school, CYC, open-air meetings continued, and Bible classes. Kilcoy was one of the fastest growing ecclesias between 1975 and 1990, averaging about 8 members baptisms a year, but sadly 6 were migrating per year. It grew to about 60 members by 1980, with approximately 100 Sunday school children. With such growing numbers, our family home was becoming too small to house the ecclesia. Brother Harry Perryman, after his visit to Kilcoy, went back to England and made a hall appeal. With the help of God and the kindness and generosity of many brethren at the Kilcoy Christadelphian Hall was built in 1980. So after 20 years, the Ecclesia moved from the home of the Lords or Hearts, its infant lodging, to where it stands today. In 1983, Brother Ron Abel revisited Kilcoy for the first time and sadly for the last. He spoke at the Bible school there, where Brother Bill was happy to see him. Sadly, later that same year, Brother Ron Abel fell asleep in the Lord. The following year, Brother Bill Naidu fell asleep in the Lord. Two unlikely friends who became brothers now await the return of the Lord. Although today the membership in Kilcoy is not the same because of the North American exodus of the 80s, it is still held together by a few faithful members who are still keeping that light stand lit. May Yahweh continue to strengthen and bless them to this end. Thank you.
Reverting to New Amsterdam and going along about 19 miles up the Berbice River, we have the Platanka Ecclesia. The term Platanka means heavy anchor in Dutch. With about 11 brethren, 3 brothers and 8 sisters. This ecclesia membership, like Eccles, consists almost entirely by brethren from outside the area, from the village of Leitang, which is about 7 miles from New Amsterdam. Likewise, the membership thought it best to relocate their meeting place nearer to their residences, and which is a much more populated area and available for spreading the gospel. At present, they are in rented premises, but pursuing arrangements to construct their own hall.
Right now, as you see, this is Brother Frederick Hammond, and then sister wife Alberta Hammond. We were born in Ghana, and we were baptized in Ghana, Accra, Ecclesia. That was a year back. I was baptized in 1974. Alberta was baptized like 1976, right? And then we then came to Guyana, and as we said in the introduction, we came to live on the farm. And as we said before, the first building was the building that I spoke about, which is...
You want to know what Ecclesia I belong to right now?
Ecclesia I belong to now. I am now in Canada, and Sister Alberta is also here with me in Cambridge, Ecclesia, in Canada. Speaking about the buildings now, and as I said, the one with the cashew tree in front happened to be the landmark of the whole entire farm that was purchased by the brethren and sisters in Guyana. And that building was a building that everybody who initially used to go on the farm used to live or stay. And the few workers were also living there until this building, which you now see under construction, was being raised. At that time, I was not even in the country. We had not arrived in Guyana as yet. And then when we came, the one that is immediately below that was the finished construction building. That was the first building after the landmark building. And that was where, as a family, we had to live. It was a bit crummy and congested, but we managed to live in it. And as you see underneath there was a little garage where the very first vehicle that was on the farm, like a pickup, that was where we used to park that vehicle. And then the picture with the coconut trees, that is on your right-hand side, happened to be how, with our presence, the short time that we were there, we had opened up the place and then gotten the building that we came and met somehow extended. And then the building that is on your left-hand side happened to be the last renovation that we did to the building that we came and inherited. So at the time that we were living Guyana and then living Guyana and the farm. This was how the building was at the time that we were living. We had done renovation and this building was solid. I hope it's still there. All right. Then now, water was a bit of a problem when we arrived on the farm. We used to get water from the trench that lead from the sluice as for washing and all of that, and then catch rainwater for drinking. So you can see the struggles that we had to go through to get water, especially to drink, and give our visitors and brethren that come on the farm on a visit. So the other picture with a tank with one of our brethren who used to come from UK to visit Guyana, who was a link man. His name was Brother J. Green. As you see him standing there with Alberta and myself struggling to get onto the trestle, we were attempting to dig a well. And then the well was under construction near the youth camp building. And then we had dug a hole to put this tank, which is up there inside, to be able to get the well water into the tank and then get on to the trestle to get the water distributed to where we used to live. And then occasionally when the water go low, then the tank gives problem by crumbling. And this tank was crumbled underneath, and I was going to travel and I had to quickly do something to bring the tank back and straighten it up and install it to get water. So that was most of the struggles we had to go through for water. But now, by God's grace, we have a well that is flowing. It's supposed to be flowing every day. And we have a lot of tanks all around the camp building. And so the water needs were also satisfied. Then now, the next building is a building that Sister Lorraine purchased from Quarantine and brought all over to the farm to be able to use it in expanding the work that we were doing. And what work was that? The Sunday school. So underneath that building, it was enclosed initially, and inside is where you see the children sitting. There were no chairs, so we had to have blocks all laid out with planks on it, and then the children were very somehow able to sit to really have their Sunday school lessons. Then as you see on the landing, initially when there was nothing at all, Alberta used to group the children, some of them on the landing and other places. And as you can see some of them on the landing, that was where the Sunday school actually started. And then anytime we have refreshment, as you can see, they sit there and then we share everything to them, and they happily sit down there and then enjoy their little refreshment. Right. Now, the same building that Sister Lorraine brought happened to be the very, very first Ecclesia hall for Platanka. When it had been enclosed and painted, then the nucleus of the Ecclesia, as you can see there in the picture, these are the nucleus of the Platanka Ecclesia. And then Brother David Andrews and some few brethren and sisters came all the way from Georgetown on that fateful day to install this signboard, Christadelphian Hall. I think it was one of the old signboards for Georgetown, which was brought to Platanka. But we were very thankful because that then showed that the Ecclesia had had the needed approval to actually be functioning as an Ecclesia. And then we can see emblems that has been well laid out on the table with the late brother Lenny Lynch. And then my own brother, Brother Abraham, who now is in UK, the two of them were the ones who were behind the table. And I think that day I exhorted. So we stood together and then had that picture. So that was that picture. Now, the next picture has to do with the parents of the Sunday school children that we had. We had this day as Sunday School Award Day. That was when children have had written the Sunday school exam and had been marked in UK, and results have been brought, and union prizes and all the prizes have come together on the list. So we then brought the children's parents to come and see what their children were actually getting by way of the preaching of the word of God and then the Sunday school activities. So they were all very happy, and they came, and all of them were actually on that side of the bench that you see. So they had not been baptized yet. And in the front row, you see me sitting by Brother Kate Washington, who is in Canada. He's a Guyanese. He used to come to visit a lot and had his umbilical cord attached to Pletanka. Everything at Pletanka, he would like to come and support. And he's still alive, and he's still in Canada. I think he's somewhere in Nova Scotia. Yeah, he was visiting at the time. Sister Lorraine is hidden. Sister Lorraine is behind the table with all the prizes on top of the table. And we will at the time call one candidate after one candidate, and they will go forward. He will give them a very lovely kiss, shake their hand, and then put their certificate in their hand, and then the little prize that go with it. So it was a very, very exciting time for us. Seeing on the other side now, you see the what we call the Ecclesia Hall and the camp building, which we finally were able to get brethren and sisters, donations from overseas, come together, and then the brother had to come from all the way UK. The brother was in his 80s with his wife. They came and made sure that this building had actually been started, and they got it to almost to finish. And later on, we did some little renovation, and I did some little work on it to get it to be suitable for both Ecclesia Hall and also camp use, that is youth camp building. So can you believe that that building has ever hosted Caribbean camp? And you can see how the compound then would have been very busy. So that really helped in opening up Pletanka, not only as a farm, but also as an ecclesia, and then youth camp building and site. And every year in August, all the 6 ecclesias will have their youths coming all the way to Pletanka to really have a 1 full week of camp on the compound. Can you imagine that? And then now every 3 years now, we had a chance to host also Caribbean camp, where brethren and sisters and young people from the Caribbean, Trinidad, Barbados, Jamaica, and other places, they all come. And then we all fit into that little, ecclesia building and then camp. At this time, as you can see, you can see the water tanks, plastic water tanks, and you can see the well also had been dug. So instead of forming water brigade all the way to the sluice with buckets, tossing it from one hand to one hand before you reach our tanks, the water was right over on the compound everywhere. And even neighbors, without asking for the water, they see the water flowing in the drains with all the pipes connected, and they fetch very good potable water. So Pletanka has made a lot of impact in the village life of Pletanka. And then now, as you can see, we had baptisms after the parents showed interest, after seeing what their children were actually being developed to be. They themselves threw their weights behind it and then showed interest to really get instructions and get instructions. And after the instructions, we had to interview them. And after their own desire and application, they were one by one baptized. So these are a few baptisms that we can really show you in the water, in the sluice that is close to the Ecclesia Hall. And the names of those in the water, we have Brother Rashid. They are still very good members in New Amsterdam. They often also drive all the way to Pletanka, especially when we were there. And they still go from time to time. And then the next picture is Brother Mark, looking a little here. He's now a big man. I have a wife, and he's a big man at Lighttown, where he's helping the father in many ways. Then we have Brother John Phillips. I think he's now in the US. That is Brother Meve Philip's son, his only son. And he was a very young man, a young person also in the Sunday school. Grew through Sunday school, used circle, and got baptized. Then we have Brother Charles' mother. She's now, I would say, fallen asleep. But she also took instructions and got baptized. So these are only a few samples of the baptisms we had. We have a few more pictures here and there. Then now, coming to the next picture, is the very big picture in front of us, is the only and one Bible school that Pletanka ever hosted in Guyana, 1999. You can imagine Bible school at Pletanka, very remote place. People come and they have to live and stay there for 4 days and then rely on the water that is on Pletanka, be fed and be spiritually motivated with all the scriptures and all the program that we know that every Bible school will have, was well orchestrated and implemented at Pletanka in 1999. So everything that needed to be done has been done. You see some few pictures and see some faces that you can easily quickly recognize. You have Sister Dawn with Abby. Sister Abby was a very young little baby, and she is in the picture. I can see Sister Analu. I don't have my glasses, but I'm still straining my eyes. I can see Sister Colleen. I can see Sister Boget. And then I can see some of the brethren that are also standing on chairs, Brother Stafford, and then other brethren like Brother Mark, and then Sister Kamalita, who is now in the US. So Pletanka has actually made a mark. And more of the strength of the churches or the ecclesias we have now, if you go to Eccles, most of all the big people in front of Ecclesia happen to be babies of camp at Pletanka. And so if we are not having no more camps, you can imagine that it means we are asking for the extension of the ecclesias. When the big people grow and you still don't have these camps going on, what is going to happen to us? We don't have no youths. Can we really say we have youths now who will go to camp and stay 1 full week as before? Maybe you have to start thinking and doing something about it. So on the footnote, you can see that the last pictures you see there is one of the Caribbean, one of the camps that we have the youths all together and they are having a Bible session. That was the top one. The second one is one of the Sunday School Award Day, which Pletanka had. And then the children were all together with their parents. So now the next picture is to do with the vehicle that we used to use. As I showed you the first one, it started with a little pony pickup. And then now, by God's grace, we got this bus, which is a Ford Transit bus, which used to help us a lot in getting all the brethren and sisters and the young people from all the remote villages to come to Pletanka for all the sessions that we have, especially weekends. Then that bus, after a time, was no longer very much operational. So that was sold before we left. And then now, in no time, this brand new bus was ordered from all the way Japan to help Pletanka to continue to grow. So presently, I'm sure this bus is still supposed to be at Pletanka. So then now, the brother, who is supposed to be the recording brother, really stepping into our shoes, as we are no longer in Guyana, happened to Brother Samuel David. And then the rest of the three are part of his family. Sister Estelle is the wife. And then we have Brother Mark standing by the father, and we have Sister Dawn David, who is now in St. Lucia. So they are supposed to be the people in charge of Pletanka now. So on that note, I'll ask for permission and say that we are done. Thank you.
The third county of Essequibo has no ecclesia presently, though several preaching efforts were made there back in the late 1980s and 90s. During that period, a number of converts springing mainly from the Bailey family were produced, but all of which have since migrated. Happily, The Bailey family have since multiplied several fold.
I am Sister Elise Bailey, hail from the Essequibo coast of Guyana and was living in Georgetown. I was baptized on the 6th of August, 1989 at the Georgetown Hall as a result of preaching effort by Brother David Andrews on the Essequibo coast. My fellow brethren, friends, and young people, it is an honor and privilege to be part of the Guyana Bible School, more so the Jubilee celebrations. My humble task is to inform you how the preaching of the truth started in the county of Essequibo. Preaching the truth on the Essequibo coast started some years prior to 1989, when advertisements were placed in the newspapers by Sister Elaine Williams, who had that responsibility. From that arrangement, the brethren had a single response from Norma Fredericks, now deceased. Norma Fredericks was instructed by Brother Keith Washington. On completion of the instruction, Sister Elaine Williams, Sister Esther Worrell, Sister Edwards, Brother Keith Washington, Brother David Singh, and others traveled to the Essequibo coast for the baptism. Sister Norma Fredericks was immersed by Brother David Singh. Sister Norma then left the Essequibo coast to live in Georgetown in the home of Brother Hugo and Sister Lorraine Mitchell. So she had the privilege of attending the Georgetown meeting. As a result of this, preaching the truth on the Essequibo coast became dormant for a number of years. Preaching the truth on the Essequibo coast came alive again when Brother David Andrews was transferred to Anna Regina as the branch manager of the now defunct Guyana National Cooperative Bank, GNCB. Obliquely opposite the Guyana National Cooperative Bank was the Guyana Cooperative Agricultural and Industrial Development Bank, Bank, where I was the assistant branch manager and Tessa Primo was a credit officer. In an effort to improve a better working relationship among the staff members of the two banks, Brother David started an after-work sport program of table tennis, volleyball, soccer, and dominoes twice weekly at the GNCB sports facility. This continued for many weeks before Brother David strategically introduced a Bible class once a week. The sport program then reduced and preaching the truth became dominant. God had a plan. So he influenced Brother David to encourage to change course, and he then formally introduced a first principle Bible class twice weekly. The sports activities ceased and staff members from both banks were attending. The first principle Bible class went on for a number of weeks, and at the conclusion of the class, Tessa Primo and I requested baptism. We were interviewed and subsequently got baptized on August the 6th, 1989 at the Georgetown Hall. Sister Tessa Primo, who hailed from Bedford on the east coast of Demerara, was later transferred to Bank head office in Georgetown. Later on, I was also transferred to the head office in Georgetown to facilitate my attendance for the Bachelor of Social Science and Management at the University of Guyana. This arrangement allowed both Sister Tessa and I to attend the weekly meetings in Georgetown. During that period, I became the junior CYC leader for Georgetown. After the completion of my studies at the University of Guyana, I was transferred as branch manager at Tain on the quarantine. So I had to fellowship at the Kilcoy Ecclesia. During those years, I continued my service in the truth and was actively involved in the sisters' classes, Bible school catering, and also in welfare work, visiting and comforting the sick. I also transported Sister Christine Hart and her daughters to the meeting after the migration of her husband, Brother Edward Hart, to Canada. I also was actively involved in the welfare of the Abedis family who migrated from Africa as refugees. Brother David Andrews subsequently returned to his head office in Georgetown on the completion of his tour of duty as branch manager at Anna Regina on the Essequibo coast. The zeal and enthusiasm of preaching the truth on the Essequibo coast resulted in Brother David having a formalized first principle introduction Bible class, which he started at the Georgetown Ecclesia, which he continues to have which he started at the Georgetown Ecclesia, which he continues to have the passion and enthusiasm to preach. From these first principle classes, a number of my family members attended and became baptized, namely Sister Borga Charles, my sister, on June the 10th, 1990, Brother Nigel Small, my nephew, in early 1991, and Sister Colleen Arjun, another sister, on July the 28th, 1991. Later came the baptism of my nieces and nephews, Sisters Audra Small, Keena Charles Cupertino, Camis Bailey, Brother Keon Charles, and Brother Jamal Husbands. In continuing to keep the truth alive in Essequibo, an open-air meeting was held in the Lima Danielstown area in April 1990. After the Bible school in Georgetown, a number of brethren traveled to assist with this task. Brethren included Brother David Andrews, Stafford Paltu, Fred Hammond, Brother Ashraf Ali, Timothy Badger, and the late Brother Colin Badger. The open air meeting was conducted for 2 days. This was followed by fortnightly follow-up visit by brethren from the Guyana Ecclesias. The most remarkable thing which happened was the baptism of my parents. My dad, Brother William Bailey, who was 82 years of age, and my mom, Sister Valda Bailey, 72 years of age, who were home instructed under the introduction of Brother David Andrews, and was baptized on November the 1st, 1992. Thanks to our Heavenly Father for using Brother David to preach the truth to our family. All of us have migrated to the United States of America, but we continue to keep the truth alive and active in our families. Other baptized members of our family are Charles, Almo, Devona, Isaiah, and Ishmael Small, Florence Bailey, Sion Livius, James Cupertino, Destiny, and Kester Charles. So from the initial contact on the Essequibo Coast, we were pleased to have witnessed the baptism of 23 members. Preaching the truth is an integral part of our discipleship. But when Christ returns, we should each be able to repeat the words to Paul, the apostle, in 1 Corinthians 3:6. I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. Thank you.
Back in the 1960s, due to the efforts of Brother Cyril and Sister Ruby Holland, the town of Bartica was host to a small ecclesia of 9 brethren, 3 brothers and 6 sisters. One of those brothers was David Andrews, but again, because of employment necessities, they all migrated and that lampstand sadly went out.
My name is Yvonne or Elizabeth Holland, now Fullington, and I'm giving a brief snapshot on the Ecclesia at Bartica, the foundation, how it started. And it all started with the baptism of my mother, Ruby Holland, in 1958 by Brother Will Watkins at the number 63 beach in Currentine, Berbice, British Guyana. And exactly 4 years later, my dad accepted a position with Booker's and to work in Bartica. So there she is. She moved with her husband and family for his new job to the town of Bartica. For those of you who may not know, Bartica is a town in the Cuyuni-Mazaruni and sits on the left bank of the Essequibo River at the junction of 2 other rivers, the Cuyuni and Mazaruni, and it is well known as the gateway to the big interiors of Guyana. So there were no Christadelphians there. So Sister Ruby Holland had to worship in isolation with her husband and children. At that time, her husband was not a baptized member of the Ecclesia, but always supported his wife 200% in all of her church activities. So from the period 1961 to 1969, that's when all of the development started. During that time, she preached the good news to anyone she could about the kingdom of God with the support from the Christadelphian Auxiliary Lecturing Society of the Guyana, CALSG, and from also any visiting brethren, missionaries that came in from the CBM, the Christadelphian Bible Mission. And during that time, Sister Ruby used her home for all meetings, and all brethren were welcome to stay. Sunday school, Bible study nights and memorial services were held in her home. On Sundays, she held 2 Sunday schools for children, one held in the mornings in her home and the other held in the afternoons, 2 miles from her home in a tent on the Potaro Road. As a young sister, I was in charge of the Potaro Sunday School. For preaching campaigns, to help accommodate the overflow of brethren who came to help, she rented a guest house, which was about 3 minutes walk from our home. Her home was always home to many brethren who came to help in the growth of the Ecclesia at Bartica. Brothers, sisters, and in many cases their spouses also traveled to Bartica to help with Sunday exhortations, open-air events and Bible campaigns, Bible classes, door-to-door proselytizing, billeting, and baptisms. On this CALSG support, brothers who visited to help with preaching and exhortations on Sundays were Brother Arthur and his sister Doreen Green, Brother Joseph Badloo, Brother Charlie Bunyan, Brother Alan Dans, Brother Keith Washington, and I'm not sure if I missed anybody. I hope not. There were other visiting brethren also who came to visit and help. Sister Valda Hamden, Sister Esther Worrell, Sister Myrtle Dundas, Brother David Green. He was the son of Brother Edmund Green. He also came, and there were some sisters from Trinidad who came, but I can't remember their names, but they're in the photograph which is attached. And then CBM support, the visiting brethren who came were also, of course, Brother and Sister Edmund Green, Brother Percy Landers, Brother Chris Tarry, Brother Paul and Elizabeth Richardson, Brother Alan Hayward, Brother David Simpson, Brother Ron Abel, and miscellaneous support from CBM was Brother A.D. Norris, who donated an organ to the Ecclesia. And then baptisms during that period of time, a 9-year period of time. The first baptism was my baptism on my birthday, 11/20, but the year was 1963. I was baptized in the Essequibo River, Bartica, by Brother Paul Richardson. Then my dad, on October 18, 1964, the following year, whilst visiting in Barbados, he was baptized at the Christchurch Beach by Brother Chandler. Then the periods 1965 to 1966, there were 2 baptisms, but I don't have the exact date and month, only the years. And that was Brother Basil Dutchin and Brother William Neblett, also baptized in the Essequibo River, Bartica. Their photos are there. Brother Basil is standing with my dad, and there's a picture of Brother William's daughter, Neblett, Alberta Neblett. And then on October 11, 1968, Brother Aubrey Fullington was also baptized in the Essequibo River, Bartica, by Brother David Simpson. Brother Aubrey is my spouse. And the following month, same year, 1968, Brother David Andrews was baptized in the Essequibo River, Bartica, by Brother Cyril Holland. And that does it for our small ecclesia. I tried to find where everybody was. I know that Brother Dutchin is still alive somewhere in the United States, and he is still a Christadelphian. He has not joined any other denomination of preaching. And his brother Neblett has died, and so has Alberta. She passed away very young at an early age. Thank you very much for listening.
Well, I was involved in Linden, and also I'm involved in Parfait. Well, how Linden came about? Linden came about, it was in 2004. I was at a Bible school in New Amsterdam, and there is where I met Sister Glory Singh, who lives in Linden. And she and I were talking, during the free time, right? And she said, boy, I'm alone in Linden. I don't have nobody there. I don't have no youth circle, no Sunday school there, and she was glad if, she could get something going. So I came home and I just think on those words, and I went back to the Ecclesia and I told them, I'm interested and I would make the first move. So I voluntarily, took the time out. I started going on Sundays. Once a month, I would go up in the morning and have a memorial service with the family. That's Sister Glory and our family, right? And then afterwards, I saw the interest was there to keep a youth circle. So I started going now on Saturdays. I went up every other Saturday. Eventually, I started going every week. Yeah. Well, when we started first, we started with Sister Glory and her 5 children. Right, 5 children, 4 boys and 3 girls, 1 girl, right, and myself. And then we went around and did some canvassing, and we were able to invite some more young people from right in the area, right in around the neighborhood there, right. When we started the register, we had 14 on roll, because I told her, we have enough now. We could have a register to keep records, your attendance and these things. So when the first register was made, we started with 14 on roll. That was in '05. Yeah, '05. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So what has been the progress of that Ecclesia or youth circle?
Well, well, as time roll on, some of them just get big and they, branch out due to school. They went and study. Some of them get work and they find it difficult to attend the youth circle, and then we get new members coming in. It just keep going and coming, like that, right? Well, the pandemic is what really, caused everything to come to a halt. Because since the pandemic, we weren't able to reach together, right? And you see, due to the getting the necessary phones and so forth to do it on Zoom or to do it on GoToMeeting, it was very challenging, very, very challenging. Although I would invite them to join with Eccles, some of them would say they don't have internet at home and this and that, right? But we still have hopes that when the pandemic is over or when things get better, to resume youth circle there.
So can you say, just before the pandemic, how things were with the operations there?
Well, just before the pandemic, things weren't so bright as I would have liked it to be. And this was because most of the youth circlers at that time were, UG age. Some of them migrated, right? And some of them get jobs, right? And we were now thinking of, grooming another set of young people. Yeah, right? Yeah.
Anybody, throughout the years since 2005, has anybody from Linden expressed interest of wanting to join the Ecclesia?
Yeah. We had one baptism. Brother Alex. Yeah, that's one baptism.
Out of Linden?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He lives in Linden still?
No, he lives in Diamond. Yeah.
So he was the Eccles Ecclesia?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We had this brother, well, he's in Georgetown, brother, what's his name? Oh, my brother, he's from Linden too. He married to Sister Borget daughter. Oh boy. I can't remember. You guys don't know Sister Borget? No. Yeah. Oh, okay, I forget his name, man. James, yes. Brother James. You remember Brother James? Yeah. James Cupertino. Yeah. He's from Linden, yeah. Yeah.
Out of the youth circle?
Well, he wasn't a member of the youth circle, but he would visit us. And he gives talks and so. I instructed him for baptism and so. Yeah, right? Certainly. Parfait, it's something that I marveled a lot over because of how it was formed. Sister Candace, I admire her as a young sister. She's very, very, into preaching, right? She's very much into preaching, and she just wants to share the good news with young people, right? Sister Candace and I had a chat, one morning at Eccles, and we were talking, and I told her that, Candace, you would do nice work with the Sunday school in Parfait. And she said she's thinking that way too, right? And I think it was about 2 weeks after, she told me that she got 4 children. I said, girl, well, start with the 4, right? And she make up a little bench at the side of our fence, and she started with 4 children, yeah? And the 4 continued to multiply, And then after that, we started to go over and would keep like cottage meeting there with her. Here the brethren from Eccles, we would go over and we would keep cottage meeting with her. And eventually we started to keep gospel proclamations over there. We did so for about 2 years. We would go over every other week, every other Sunday, and keep gospel proclamation. But before we have the meetings, we would go canvassing, inviting young people, inviting the neighborhood and so forth, of which we were able to attract a lot of people to come to the meetings, And it was very nice, you know. They showed a lot of interest, right? And what we find was encouraging too is that the parents there, they would also invite their children to come along with them to the gospel proclamation. So you find in the Sunday evening the place was so packed, right? We don't have enough seats, you know. We won't have enough seats. And myself and Brother Gerald, Jermaine, and you know, Kessie, we thought about started to keep the memorial service because some of the friends over there, they say they want to come to church, you know, but you know it's still over the river and they have to pay transportation and these kind of things and so forth. Sister Candace was helping out a few of them with it, but we thought that would be too much, so we say we would carry the service over there to them, the memorial service. So every other Sunday we would have gone over there to keep the memorial service. That was what after 2 years of gospel proclamation. Yeah. And it was going well. We divided the brothers. We have, you know, Eccles have a lot of brothers, and we would share them, you know, divide them up. Some of us will stay at Eccles, some of us will go over. And it was going very well. Right?
Except for
Except
for the pandemic.
Pandemic, yeah. The pandemic come and yeah, it really slowed down everything, man. Well, they have a similar problem, you know. They don't have internets. Most of the families over there, they don't have internet connections. So that was challenging for them. Yeah, that was challenging.
So where are we now with Parfit?
Well, right now, things are kind of getting back to normal, and we soon will resume, you know, our work back in Parfit. Yeah. Mind you, you know, Sister Candace still have her Sunday school going on.
Oh.
Yeah, she still have it.
This is good.
Yeah.
I have one question. I don't know if Jamal has any. But my next question would be, how did the people over there adapt to the truth, listening to the truth? Because remember, there are different churches all around Guyana. And Echoes coming with the Christadelphians, what we call the truth.
Yeah.
How did they respond to hearing this?
Well, to be honest, you know, at first, we were getting a lot of questions on this, on that, and it depends on the subject we spoke on. We were getting a lot of questions, right? But our brothers were so, you know, good at answering them, and not only just answering them, but showing them from the scriptures, because we always would share our Bibles with them. You know, we allow them to see for themselves, and eventually we were getting over to them. Yeah, we were getting over to them.
And did they believe?
Yeah, they believe. We have a friend there. She was a Pentecostalist, and she would come every week, right, to hear us, But she said she belongs to her church. Yeah. She said she belongs to her church. Although we would show her the difference, you know. Yeah, that was some of the challenges we faced.
Apart from the fact of heavy migration over the years, mostly to North America, recent attendance have been significantly impacted by the COVID virus plague. Thanks be to God, this menace is presently showing signs of receding, and many of the halls that were forced to close 2 years ago are now reopening.